Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning for some of you. Good evening. Thank you all for joining today to this second webinar held by the PsIP. Today, as you know, we are going to be discussing a little bit about regulation. We are going to have a great speaker with us. So I will start today by sharing my screen, just for giving you a brief introduction of what we are going to have today. Today we are going to be given the second webinar of this first webinar series that has been prepared by the PsIP. For the ones who doesn't know me, my name is Ariadne Vargas, and I am working with the PsIP and with the IEA. This first webinar series, as I mentioned it in the previous one, is going to be a series of 3 webinars. The first one was already given by Ivenon, so we are going to be uploading the recording in the following days. Today we have the second webinar that is going to be held by Sally Ormiston from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry from Australia. So Sally is going to be giving us a nice review about the regulatory framework in Australia. And then for the next webinar, we are going to have Laura Jeffers from the USDA and the IFIS US. So I will take some minutes to introduce Sally. So Sally has held a range of roles across the government and the industry. Now she's currently the Assistant Director between the Biosecurity Plant and Science Services Division of the Australian Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. So, you have all Sally's description in the picture, in the screen, sorry. And it's important to highlight that Sally, she has an honor degree in agricultural science and agronomy from the University of Sydney. Well, for not saying too much, I will leave you today with Sally, and I give the micro to Sally. So Sally, welcome today, and thanks for your help with this PsIP webinar.
And good morning or good afternoon or evening, everybody. If you just bear with me a moment while I set up my my screen and my presentation slides, and I'll kick things off.
Okay.
If you can just let me know when you can see my slides.
Yeah, we can see it.
Hello everyone, as Ariadne said, my name's Sally Ormiston from the Biosecurity Plant Division of the Australian Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. And today I'll be presenting an Australian policy perspective on the role that irradiation as a phytosanitary treatment for plant products can play in facilitating agricultural trade. And I'll be sharing an overview of the regulatory framework and landscape for its use in Australia. The Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry is an Australian federal government department, and we work to enhance Australian agriculture, fisheries and forestry industries by creating new or improved export opportunities for Australian agriculture. We also manage biosecurity risks to protect our multi-billion-dollar agricultural industries and to meet our international obligations as a trading partner. We're also the Australian National Plant Protection Organisation. And so the area that I represent is Biosecurity Plant and Science Services Division, and our responsibilities including managing the phytosanitary risks associated with plant and plant products for trade. This includes conducting pest risk analyses and leading negotiations on phytosanitary measures to facilitate trade. And my team, amongst other things, develops strategies to support technical market access negotiations for regulated products and to secure trade pathways for our industries that are commercially viable and will support trade into the future. And so my presentation today will be focusing more on the policy approach to irradiation rather than the technical details of the treatment itself. However, I do have some colleagues on the line from our technical areas. So if there's any technical questions at the end, they'll be able to assist. For growing and exporting high quality agri-food products to a broad range of overseas markets. Approximately 72% of Australia's total agricultural production is destined for export markets, with an estimated total export value of $60 billion. And plant products make a significant contribution to Australia's agricultural sector. Horticulture production levels are estimated to reach $18.2 billion in 23-24, with export revenue expected to exceed last year's total of $3.8 billion over this same period. And further growth in our industry is forecast. And so exports in particular are of increasing interest to our horticultural industries. And so recognising the significance of exports to our industries, a key focus of our department is looking for improvements to the way that we facilitate both import and export trade now and into the future. So I think we all probably know that trade in agricultural products is becoming increasingly globalised. And across the world, the import and export trading environment is changing and becoming increasingly complex. Industries around the world are looking to diversify their markets. Consumers want access to regular and reliable supply chains, and bilateral trade agreements continue to create new commercial opportunities for our industries. For example, according to the FAO, world tropical fruit exports, so things like avocado, pineapple, papaya, and mango, increased from 3.3 million tonnes in 2005 to 8.2 million tonnes in 2021, and this number is expected to grow to 10.8 million tonnes by 2030. And so as the volume of produce movement around the globe continues to grow, there's a commensurate increase in biosecurity risk associated with trade. As members of the World Trade Organization and bound by the WTO Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, Australia and our trading partners do have the right to protect themselves from the risks posed by the entry of pests and diseases relating to international trade. Under the SPS agreement, countries can set their own standards. However, the agreement also specifies that biosecurity measures, requirements or conditions to facilitate trade in plant products must be based on science. So as an exporting nation, Australia benefits from these rules and standards because they help to create a smooth, predictable and free international trade environment and provide secure conditions which can help reduce some of the risks associated with doing business across the world. And as an importer, we also benefit from these rules and standards which enable us to protect our industries and unique ecosystems. And so the SPS agreement plays a critical role in what the produce trade environment looks like. We're in a changing regulatory environment with global trends towards the review, deregistration or non-acceptance of traditionally used ag chemistries and the lowering of MRLs. There are growing expectations that our production and supply chains systems consider sustainability and the environment, and consumers are increasingly savvy about the origins and production practices used for their food, with some trading partners such as the EU looking at the introduction of sustainability requirements. And finally, there are also growing pressures on production with increasing input costs, and so industries are looking for cost-effective and the least trade restrictive requirements for export possible. And so given this shifting and changing environment, it's very important to the Australian government and our industries that we can continue to meet trading partner requirements both now and into the future. And for imports coming into Australia, we want to be assured of the same things. And so as a department, we're strongly committed to finding new and alternative ways to facilitate trade that are effective, viable and efficient. And for us to do this well, having access to a range of phytosanitary pathway options is important. Currently, we have a number of phytosanitary pathways options available to us for fresh produce, such as irradiation, cold treatment, pest-free area conditions and fumigation, but it's important that we continue finding new and alternative methods that can expand those options for our industries into the future. Perspective, phytosanitary irradiation is an emerging treatment pathway available to us to facilitate two-way trade that supports us in meeting our responsibilities as an NPPO. It is a simple and effective treatment that can be used across a wide range of commodities and pests, allowing a generic and single dose which delivers consistent results. It can offer strong sustainability credentials, and it can allow for efficient trade in fresher, high-quality produce and allows for an uninterrupted cold chain. I'll expand a little bit further on 3 of the reasons why we see a growing role for irradiation pathways into the future. So phytosanitary irradiation provides a highly efficacious alternative to commonly relied on and increasingly regulated chemistries for managing biosecurity risks associated with trade. By effectively managing biosecurity risks, it protects the industries and environments of imported countries from the potential spread and impacts of damaging pests. To share an example, Australia is free of many of the world's pests and diseases. However, we do have unique pests such as the Queensland fruit fly, which is endemic to the eastern coast of Australia and not present in other countries. And so one of the advantages of irradiation is that a generic dose is effective against a wide range of commodities and pests, including Queensland fruit fly. Phytosanitary irradiation can support sustainability, which is increasingly becoming a focal point for industries, an expectation of domestic and overseas consumers, and also of governments, as expectations grow that we move towards a future that considers the environment. Irradiation is being increasingly used as an alternative to chemicals such as methyl bromide for pre-shipment disinfestation of some commodities. And this allows us to move away from the use of ozone-depleting substances and therefore can contribute to obligations under the Montreal Protocol and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Additionally, electronic source e-beam facilities can also offer the ability for carbon neutral treatment with zero waste and radioactive material handling or storage. Phytosanitary irradiation treatments are very fast, and this is beneficial especially for getting perishable, high-value commodities into market as soon as possible. This helps exporters maintain a premium product quality into market and provides consumers to high-quality produce. It doesn't break the cold chain, so the temperature of produce can be maintained right into market. And so for Australia, we see this as a good tool to support our reputation as a supplier of premium product. An example we like to share demonstrating this is the export of table grapes to Vietnam following the approval of an irradiation pathway. Within 72 hours of being picked, our industry had product treated and in market available to consumers. And that's just a time frame that isn't possible under many of our traditional treatment pathways. And so this provides really strong opportunities for niche and high value products with limited seasonal windows. And it's especially practical for commodities that are destined for export via sea freight, air freight, sorry. It allows fruit to be moved from the orchards to the ports for fast treatment before being sent by air to other markets. And so these are all reasons that support our perspective that irradiation will be a really useful tool for two-way trade, and we want to be on the front foot in driving its utilisation. So I've given a bit of an overview of why we think it's a useful tool for trade, and I'll now share a bit of an overview of the regulatory and other frameworks in place within Australia that actually allow the treatment to happen. And so in Australia, regulatory responsibilities are shared between federal and state authorities, as well as Food Standards Australia New Zealand, which is the governmental body responsible for developing food standards. Our radiation facilities are regulated by the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Authority, or ARPANSA, in the case of Commonwealth facilities, or by state and territory governments for commercially owned facilities. And these authorities' role is to regulate radiation sources, radiation facilities, and radiation users to ensure that the health and safety of people and the environment is maintained. And this includes things like the movement and security of radiation sources, in line with the requirements of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The next stakeholder in a regulatory framework is FSANZ, or Food Standards Australia and New Zealand. So we do have a food standard for irradiation, which is standard 1.543. And this standard allows the irradiation of all fresh fruit and vegetables for the purpose of pest disinfestation for a phytosanitary objective. And the standard allows use on the condition that the absorbed dose is no lower than 150 gray and no higher than 1 kilogray, and allows irradiation by multiple source materials such as gamma ray, X-ray, or electronic source. Our food standard also sets record keeping and labelling requirements. And so in Australia, when a food or food ingredient has been irradiated, it must be labelled that it has been treated with ionising radiation, and labels must carry text to the effect of treated with ionising radiation or irradiated name of the food. So the wording isn't compulsory. However, whichever wording is chosen, it must clearly indicate that the food has been treated with ionising radiation. It's worth noting that our Food Standards Code does not mandate the display of the Redurer symbol, though it can be used voluntarily. It can't, however, replace that wording requirement. And you'll see on the slide there, I've just included an example of the labelling that's used for produce that's been treated for domestic trade. Labelling has nothing to do with my role. This is just a really good example where the labelling requirement has been met, but I think it's been done in a way that would be perceived quite well for consumers, taking away some of that misplaced fear about what irradiation is and promoting the benefits of the treatment. And finally, in the regulatory framework, we have my agency, who is responsible for overseeing the regulation of treatment for goods imported and exported into Australia. These responsibilities are defined by the Export Control Act 2020 and associated orders and regulations which identify the requirements for exporting goods from Australia. And for imports, the Biosecurity Act 2015 and associated regulations identify the requirements for importing goods into Australia. And so, from a regulatory perspective, irradiation is treated very much the same as for other treatments in that product security, appropriate packaging, traceability, and phytosanitary certificates are all required. Our department has treatment standards for irradiation that a facility must meet in order to export, and we audit facilities against our treatment standard and any additional importing country requirements as needed based on our agreed trade protocols. Other requirements that exported product must meet include product security. So under Australian and most other NPPO requirements, once goods have attained a phytosanitary status, in this case, once they've been irradiated, phytosanitary security must be maintained at all times. And so that is, the goods must be adequately protected to prevent reinfestation or contamination. And so in our policy, adequately protected means that the goods either have to have secure packaging at either the carton or pallet level, or must meet isolation requirements. So they must be packed in an insect-proof space, and then directly into a shipping container, for example. And when doing the inspection for export, the authorised officer must confirm that the packaging is suitable to meet these product security requirements. Exported products must be traceable, and so from the time that goods have attained a phytosanitary status, so when they've been irradiated, or at the farm level in the case of some protocol markets. All movement of goods needs to be documented to be able to ensure that product has maintained that product security and that it hasn't been substituted. And thirdly, treatment certificates. And so these must be completed by the irradiation operator and include information such as date, dose, the commodity, and other distinguishing features such as the lot number. And so it's once all of these requirements have been met, and that's the point at which a phytosanitary certificate is able to be issued, stating the applied irradiation dose and effectively that trade can occur. And so when we think about exports, all of these steps in the process and in our system need to be robust so that trading partners have trust and confidence in our systems and processes. The department does publish a wide range of instructional material on our website outlining how we deliver upon our responsibilities. And I've got the document I've included on the slide there is our Australian Phytosanitary Treatment Application Standard for irradiation treatment. And what this does is it sets out a consistent approach for application of phytosanitary treatment in Australia and alignment with international standards. And regulatory alignment's really important because it enables domestic trade between Australian states and territories and guarantees appropriate assurance and traceback also for our trading partners. And it also provides effective guidance or provides guidance on the effective application of irradiation as a phytosanitary measure for regulated pests on plant products. We do have number of agreed schedules in place to support the import and export of plant products. For importers, requirements for plant products imported into Australia listed on the Biosecurity Import Conditions database. And for exporters, the Manual of Importing Country Requirements, or MICOR, is a searchable database by country and commodity that provides information on all the phytosanitary requirements that apply. So I'll now share a bit of an overview of what the current irradiation landscape looks like in Australia, and then I'll discuss what we think the future could look like and some of the opportunities and challenges along the way. So domestically, irradiation is used year-round for interstate trade within Australia of over 60 crops. We also have approved the import of irradiated fresh fruit from a number of markets, including Thailand, Vietnam, Pakistan, India, and Mexico. And we expect that this will expand as more trading partners include irradiation pathways as part of new or improved market access requests. Our industries are also increasingly using irradiation as a treatment for exports. We currently have access for irradiated fresh produce to Vietnam, New Zealand, the US, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Fiji, with very, very strong demand from our industries to expand these pathways further. And so all in all, I think in Australia, it's a very positive story with regards to irradiation, with very positive uptake from industry and also from our consumers. But there is still more we'd like to achieve. In particular, it's a big priority for us to see broader uptake both domestically and internationally. But in achieving that, I think there's still some challenges along the way. So I think probably many of us on the line today would relate to and share a lot of these same challenges. And so I'll discuss a little bit about that now. So what does the future look like? I think first of all, in getting there, we've got some challenges. And some of you might have heard this phrasing before. The challenges that we can see to broader uptake, we like to broadly categorise as hard barriers and soft barriers. So soft barriers are things that we consider as deterrents or obstacles that don't absolutely restrict use of irradiation, but can cause challenges to uptake. These can include the costs associated with changes to packaging and labelling, supply chain education and awareness, slow domestic and international uptake, and a low base of consumer acceptance, which we see tends to reflect low historical usage. And then hard barriers are things that prevent the use of a treatment and must be resolved for use or trade to occur. And so some of these can include the absence of relevant regulations or legislation that allows the use or sale of irradiated produce to occur, the absence of commodity-specific trade protocols, limited or no access to suitable approved treatment facilities, and also the skills and the capability in order to deliver and maintain a irradiation phytosanitary treatment system. In Australia, we like to think of challenges as opportunities. And so to test some of our own assumptions on some of these hard and soft barriers to trade and some of the drivers behind them, in 2021, our department commissioned a report which was an analysis of international food standards and consumer acceptance of phytosanitary irradiation in fresh produce. And what we sought to get out of this was to better understand the use and the attitude towards irradiation globally and how this might be impacting government policy. Some of the key findings of this report were that consumer acceptance is shifting, with younger generations in particular more open to new technologies. In markets where irradiation is already approved for use on food, the theory of consumer resistance has been repeatedly disproven by sales. Ultimately, if produce is available, attractive, and has accessible pricing, consumers are willing to purchase it. The report also told us that a lack of food standards should not be conflated with consumer resistance and vice versa. And finally, that industry and commercial retailers have been very successful in managing consumer messaging and acceptance, and only a low level of education has been shown to be needed to support consumer acceptance. And so while these are all consumer-focused insights, which is not the focus of my presentation today and ultimately not the work of my department, the report provided some really useful insights for us to consider if we look back to the identified soft and hard barriers. And linking these findings back to the work that our department does do, what we've taken from this report is that education, engagement, and promoting domestic uptake and two-way trade pathways are some of our best tools to unlock opportunities for broadening the use and uptake of irradiation. To address these challenges. I've grouped these into 3 areas of activity that highlight some of the work that we're doing as a department. So of course, research is very important, and through our established Rural Development Corporation funding model and other projects, our department does support research into phytosanitary irradiation. So through our established RDC model, departmental funding's been leveraged to support research into areas such as pest mortality, pest disease transmission, post-treatment effects on product quality and shelf life, as well as commodity-specific projects. And this funding also supports activities such as workshop and other events. We also engage very closely with our growers, treatment providers, and our research community to understand the knowledge gaps and opportunities in the irradiation space, and to encourage industry to consider, we also encourage our industry to consider irradiation pathways as part of their export ambitions, and to look at what data they might need to support that, such as efficacy data or dose mapping. The next piece of the puzzle is education. And education on the benefits and processes of irradiation is really important to support confidence and uptake. So last year, My team developed a series of short videos and supporting materials called the Irradiation Insights Education Package to help educate domestic and international stakeholders on why and how Australia uses irradiation as a phytosanitary treatment for fresh produce. And the series focuses on the application, logistics, regulation, and the effectiveness of the treatment. If any of you were at the Irradiation conference in Bangkok last year, you might have already seen these. I won't play any of the videos today, but I have included a QR code in the slides for those of you that are interested. And these are a resource that we have publicly available on our department's website for anybody to access. The third column of some of the actions that we're taking is partnerships. And partnerships are something that we've recognised are really central when it comes to operating in new ways. And so we're really looking to build our relationships across the board. In the trade space, we're very keen to work with our trading partners to support greater uptake. And we do this through engagement with our trading partners, our capacity building activities, and advocacy in bilateral and multilateral forums. I've mentioned that we do encourage our domestic industries to consider irradiation for export, but we're also encouraging our trading partners to consider these pathways to support the import of their products into Australia. I think it's really important to keep in mind that trade's a two-way street. It's also important to acknowledge that we know that not all trading partners are at the same point as Australia is with regards to the use of irradiation, and in many places there are still persisting sensitivities. And so what this engagement and partnerships can look like can vary from trading partner to trading partner, from very early conversations and just starting the discussion so that we better understand the concerns or barriers to adoption, to working to approve facilities, the sharing of information, connecting stakeholders and other government agencies, capacity building, and then right up to negotiating of two-way trade pathways. And I guess from the purely just trade-focused space, developing local relationships is really important. I think probably for those of you on the line that might work in government, or really for anybody in your respective roles, I think many people will be able to relate to the feeling that we just can't do everything. And so the reality is that there's no single organisation or person that can make broader acceptance happen. And so that's when there are those really good opportunities to develop those local partnerships and look at opportunities where we can support each other's efforts. And some examples of what these partnerships could look like might include partnerships with local treatment providers. For us, this is really helpful for many reasons, and helps us to showcase Australia's systems. Could be research partnerships to fill knowledge gaps. Could be starting those conversations with other departments or agencies that might have a role in this space. Might be looking for and engaging with organisations or entities out there that might be able to support capacity building and skills development. And more broadly, I think just building networks like this, like the one on the line today and through the PsIP, and looking at what we can learn from each other and how others have approached similar challenges or are approaching similar challenges. Race through my presentation, but I guess I'll sort of wrap up with some key messages or observations. I think it's fair to say that irradiation's currently underutilised tool, and it's going to be increasingly important for sustainable and future-proof trade, and it offers some really clear commercial benefits to our industries. It's fast, it's effective, and it maintains product quality. Australia, I think, has really been at the forefront of uptake and use of irradiation, but we do recognise that the adoption and uptake, more broadly, will take time, and there's still some barriers to be addressed on all fronts. Partnerships are going to be key for all of us to address these challenges. And so we like to encourage all stakeholders, both domestically and internationally, to be proactive and future-looking to help address these barriers. And we want to support this where we can. I think it's helpful for us all to question whether the barriers to adoption remain relevant and to take advantage of the work that's been done before, such as through Codex and IPPC, and look to learn from the experiences and efforts of others. And that probably wraps everything up. So thank you. I hope you all got something out of it.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really clear and really useful for everybody. And now I think that we can go to the question and answer section of the webinar. So if any of you have any questions, could you please write them into the Q&A section? You will find there a question mark into the Teams webinar, and also you can put it into the chat. Right now I have a question in the chat from Peter Roberts that says, for a country wishing to send irradiated produce to Australia, what is the approval process that the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and requires for their irradiation facilities?
Yeah, really good question. And admittedly, I don't work in the imports trade space, so I won't be able to give a very, very detailed answer. I think I might have some imports colleagues on the line, so feel free to pop your hand up or put some information into the chat. But I guess essentially, we've got Doug with his hand up. Is there any way, Ariadne, that we can give Doug the...
Yep, I just gave the micro to Butterwick, could be. I gave the
Karuish.
Yeah, and also, well, he left the room, but I am giving the micro to Douglas.
Yeah,
Douglas, you can unmute
Thank you.
and speak.
Worked beautifully. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Irradiation is offshore irradiation or pre-shipment irradiation is a treatment that Australia requires to be approved by the exporting country and also Australia ourselves. So we like to see the exporting country have a process in place for its own regulation of approving that facility. And then we review that information with a view to approve that facility as well. Once that country has demonstrated to us that there is a process in place, we can then, our approval processes are less in the future. So I suppose there's a two-stage process, one for the exporting country to regulate and approve that facility, and a second stage is for us to approve that facility, and in time we get to understand that trading partners' processes for regulating irradiation facilities, and our involvement in the approval process can be reduced in time as we get a better understanding of the exporting country systems. So that's a very high level answer. In terms of practicalities, what we require is to see information from the exporting country that they have approved that facility, and then we ask for a submission from that country, which starts the approval process at our end. Thank you. I hope that assists.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I have Butterwick also. I am allowing the micro. If you want to say something, you can unmute your micro and speak freely. Well, I don't know if that's working. Well, I don't know. You can unmute, but I have the name user Butterwork. Could it be? I just gave you you have your hand up. You can unmute yourself and just start talking. There you are.
Okay. Are there any products shipped to the United States?
There's any products that we ship to the United States?
Yes. Are there any products you ship to the United States?
So for the United States, I believe we have access for irradiation for mangoes and for lychees. In terms of the specific trade volumes of those commodities, I don't have those details today, but we definitely do utilise those pathways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have another question in the chat from Lisa. It says, are there any examples of an on-arrival irradiation treatment for food imported into Australia?
So I believe we do offshore treatment only for irradiation.
Okay, thank you. The next question says, how about the acceptances of irradiation product in Australia?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that's relating to domestic consumers. So I guess within Australia, we've got growing uptake. So I think I mentioned in the presentation, or maybe I didn't, that for the purposes of domestic trade, we have at least about 60 crops or more that are being being irradiated for the domestic market. And so some of those commodities include grapes, mangoes, lychee, cherries, broccoli, melons, tomatoes, summer fruit, citrus, and many others. So it's quite an extensive list. In terms of volumes and how much is being moved around the domestic market, that's probably a question more for some of the more people on the more commercial side of trade. But in terms of availability and uptake to consumers, I know that irradiated produce is being sold in at least 8 grocery chains around Australia, including Costco and IGA. And industry, I know, is really hoping to expand that footprint into the not too distant future. And I guess just in terms of consumer uptake or consumer attitudes, I think it's been really, really positive. I included in my slides, there was that picture of some of the labelling that's been used, I think, in stores in Tasmania. And I've seen, photos and images of some of the labelling or the messaging that accompanies irradiated produce in stores, and in areas like Tasmania. So Tasmania is a pest-free area for all fruit flies, and I guess there's a lot of pride in the biosecurity status and in the good environment in Tasmania. And so some of the sort of messaging around irradiated produce there is about promoting that this has been irradiated to protect the environment, or chemical-free treatments and things like that, and that's had really good consumer responses and uptake there. So it's a positive story, and I think it's one that will continue growing.
Thank you so much, Sally. I have another question that says, are there any products shipped to Morocco or Africa?
Not sure that I have. I'm not sure that we do export irradiated produce to either of those markets. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Possibly not.
Okay, thank you. Now I have another one that says, in slide 2, you highlighted that the total value of production to fall by 14% from 92 billion in 2022-2023. What is driving this fall?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think partly some of that growth has been driven by seasonal conditions. We've been fortunate in Australia in the last couple of years to have had pretty good rainfall and pretty good growing conditions, which has resulted in good yields for our industries. But then also, I guess there's just been huge expansion of particularly horticultural goods across many of our hort sectors. So we've seen a lot of growth and additional plantings across, table grapes and avocados and citrus and a lot of our major horticultural industries. And so as those increased plantings come online, that's where we're, when they're sort of coming into production, that's where we're seeing those really big growth in the hort sector in particular. I thought that as well, because I've seen a message building on the previous question about domestic uptake and the sort of the volume of product moving domestically. So Ben Riley, who works for Steritech, which is our irradiation provider in Australia, has just added in the comments that Steritech has treated over 3,400 pallets of produce for the domestic market last year, which equated to over 15 million consumer units that were labelled according to our requirements and sold with success over the last 12 months. And he's also confirmed that that number is expected to grow significantly in the year ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sally. I have two more questions, I think. It says that is the report that you commissioned available in part or whole?
It's not one, the report itself, it's not one that we sort of generally share externally, because it was sort of just, I guess, developed for those sort of internal insights and a lot of desktop research. But we do have a bit of a, I might even be able to bring it up on the screen. We do have just a placemat that there's some of the findings of the report. So I might just share my screen again if that's okay, and people can have a quick squiz.
Yep.
Is that one showing up there now, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. This is just a bit of a placemat that we put together to summarise some of the key findings of the report that we found. And so it was it wasn't, a completely comprehensive report of every market and all consumers. I guess we sort of focused on some key ones, but there were some really clear trends there around, particularly around, the value and the benefits of consumer education, and about some of those changing perceptions of the treatments that are applied to foods.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sally. And now I have another question. It says, do you have any advice for countries that are looking to develop regulations on phytosanitary irradiation?
A really good question, I think, because, there's so many different approaches across the globe, and I think it can be quite complex, especially if you look at all the different, agencies or players that are involved across government and industry and the like. But I think if I was to give advice, I think, it can seem complex, but I think there's some really good examples out there of regulations and standards that are already in place in countries around the globe that are supporting the effective use of phytosanitary irradiation. So, for the food standards, for example, for Australia, we have our FSANS, the standard, which is standard 1.5.3. But, you've also got other sources like Codex for efficacy. There's resources or standards in place such as ISPM 28 or USDA treatment manuals, for example. And then for facility requirements as well, there's really good examples out there, or standards like ISPM 18. So I think they're really good sort of reference and starting points. And then, I guess countries like Australia can be a really good example to borrow from, but and sort of alluded to it in my presentation, but I think it's also really good to share learnings on, what might we do differently, or how might this be done? Is there some systems that work better, or, they've matured over time? And I think just finally, I'd probably reflect that, certainly when it comes to trade and export and import trade, I think there's a lot of benefit to come out of having consistent regulations and standards that align as closely as possible. Of course, they want to be effective for trade and effective for their intended purposes, but where there is alignment, it can just help with streamlining trade and not creating additional requirements that, all of our respective industries would need to meet. So, some thoughts.
Thank you, Sally. Can I add something to your answer also? Is that I must think after IMRP, I must believe that the key of the success is just to work as a team. So you work with the irradiators, you work with the producers, with the customer acceptance, and also with the regulator part. So I think that when a country wants to develop this technology, the country needs to work all together. So this is something that Australia did pretty well. Okay, I have another question for you. It says, do you think that China, Japan, and Taiwan will begin to accept irradiated fresh produce in the near future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a little bit difficult for me to answer because obviously that's, I guess the decisions of China, Japan, and Taiwan and their sort of regulatory environments. But, there are examples in those markets where irradiation is used for certain, very, very specific purposes. And I think, they may well do, but it will take time to get there because at the moment, the regulations and the frameworks aren't in place to allow that. And so, I think for that to be a possibility for those markets, there's, to my understanding, still some work that needs to be done. But I guess in terms of timeframes or yes or no, that's probably a difficult question to answer. Our industries would certainly hope so.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Well, I think that those are the whole questions, unless there's somebody else that wants to put another one in the chat. Maybe you want to, I don't know, highlight or give a key message for ending. No, just wait for me. I just received another question. It says, let me check. No, it's just an answer. It says that Ben is answering that this is something that he can help in answering, related with tons of irradiated fruits that have been importing in Australia. So Ben is saying that the average is growing at a 30% per year for the last 6 years, so something that is quite good. But he guessed it could be around 500 or 1,000 million tons. So that I think that's great. So now coming back, do you have any key message, Sally, that you want to share with the audience just for being closing the event?
Sure. Look, I guess just first of all, thank you all for the your time today. I hope it's been interesting and you've hopefully taken something out of my presentation, and thanks as well to my colleagues that have also joined us early in the morning. I guess if I were to any final message, would just be really to reinforce the importance of partnerships and working together, and also just as a trading partner, Australia is really happy and willing to work with trading partners around the globe. But feel free. I did pop an email address on the last slide, but feel free to send us an email or reach out through Ariadne if you have any further questions. But yes, thank you all for the time.
Well, thank you, Sally, and well, thank you everybody for joining today with us, and well, for the ones that joined it at the half of the webinar, and for the ones that even couldn't join, we are going to upload the recording of this webinar in the following days. So keep following the PsIP website, and we are going to be presenting the next webinar that is going to be next week with Laura, now talking about regulation in the US. So thank you so much, Sally, and thank you everybody for joining. See you maybe next week. Goodbye, everybody.